Why did they always underestimate her? Was it the height, the soft features, or maybe it was the quiet way she carried herself when she left the training center at night, keys dangling loosely in her hand like she had no reason to watch her back? They never noticed the way her eyes scanned shadows, the rhythm of her steps never random, always deliberate, always prepared. But that night, when 5 engines growled out of the dark like wolves hunting, she already knew. They hadn't just chosen the wrong target. They had chosen the wrong soldier, at the wrong time in the wrong place. Blackwood's boots pressed into the cracked asphalt as if she were pressing into memory itself. The depot loomed behind her, its massive walls lit in pale yellow floodlights, and the air carried the smell of pine and motor oil that clung to every military installation she'd ever lived on. It was a smell she'd grown used to, the smell of endings, of long shifts, of soldiers who worked until their bodies gave out because tomorrow someone else's life might depend on what they'd learned that day. She had locked the doors of the training hall just minutes earlier. 12 hours of running soldiers through drills, breaking down muscle memory until even the most stubborn recruits learned how to breathe through fear instead of choke on it. Her frame, just 5 feet and 4 inches, often betrayed her in first impressions. New Rangers, Special Forces candidates, even seasoned operators had mistaken her for someone teaching support staff basic self-defense. The look on their faces when she took them to the mat, efficient, sharp, merciless, never grew old. Not because she enjoyed humiliating them, but because it reminded her of something her father used to say. The fight is never about size, it's about spirit. That spirit was carved into her bones in a small boxing gym in South Philadelphia, years before Colorado's mountain air had become her second home. Her father, Tony Blackwood, a Golden Gloves champion whose career had been cut short by a back injury, raised her between punching bags and sweat-stained ropes. He, tell her between rounds, control is everything. Control the rhythm, control the distance, control yourself. The rest, that's just noise. She had carried those words across continents, into battlefields, into barracks where men twice her size doubted her, until the day she put them on their backs. Still, even with all that, there were nights she wished she could simply walk to her car without being tested. Tonight was one of those nights. The first sound was the low vibration of engines, muffled at first, then louder as they echoed off the warehouse walls. She paused, keys biting into her palm, eyes narrowing as headlights pierced the dark. 5 beams. 5 machines positioning themselves in a semicircle around her beat-up Civic, a sad little car parked among armored vehicles that looked like they could crush it by accident. She recognized the patchwork jackets before the riders even dismounted. Prison Inc., the same crew that had harassed a young private hours earlier outside the exchange. That memory burned sharper now. The kid couldn't have been more than 19, nervous laugh, trembling hands clutching his duffel bag while they demanded he buy them beer with his military discount. She had stepped in then, calm but unyielding, flashing her instructor credentials like a badge of authority. They had sneered, but they backed down, or so it had seemed. She should have known men like that didn't forgive humiliation. They carried it like rust inside steel, corroding, festering, waiting for a moment to strike back. Now they had their chance. The leader was the first to swing his leg over the bike, boots scraping asphalt, body moving with the weight of someone who had lived inside prison walls. His tattoos climbed up his arms, crude images blurred by time and ink. He grinned, and it wasn't the grin of a man who thought he was clever. It was the grin of someone convinced of victory before the fight began. His men followed, each larger than the last, fanning out like predators circling prey. Felt her chest rise with a deep, steady breath. No fear, not anymore. Fear wasted energy she couldn't afford. Instead, she cataloged them the way she always did, assessing, measuring, 2 limps, old injuries. One moved sharper, younger, quicker, he'd be the dangerous one. The leader's arrogance was already his weakness. 5 men, yes. 50 pounds heavier each, yes. But numbers didn't matter if they were already underestimating her. Her father's voice whispered from somewhere deep inside, "They'll look for fear in your eyes. Don't give it. Let them see calm. Calm unnerves a predator more than rage ever could. She thought of her younger brother. Cerebral palsy had bent his body but not his spirit. Growing up, she had watched her parents scrape and sacrifice to afford his medical care, his therapy. The military had been her way of lifting some of that weight from their shoulders. Even now, 12 years later, she carried him in moments like this. The way he had smiled when he typed code with slow but steady fingers. The way he never complained about the hand life dealt him. She couldn't let these men win, not tonight. If she gave ground, if she allowed them to claim even a shred of dominance, what message would that send to the next young private who walked this path? The leader stepped closer. His breath reeked of alcohol, his words oiled with malice. "Little army girl, thought you could embarrass us, huh? Thought you walk away after making us look weak." His hand lifted, reaching for her shoulder as if he owned the right to place it there. That was his mistake, his final mistake. Her elbow shot forward before his hand made contact, precise as a blade. It connected with the solar plexus, driving the air out of his lungs in one brutal exhale. His knees buckled, his body folded, shock flashing across his eyes before gravity claimed him. The second attacker lunged without thought. Momentum was his weapon, and his downfall. She pivoted, gripped, and used his own weight to launch him into the side of a parked truck. Metal groaned with the impact as he collapsed in a heap. The third hesitated, and hesitation was fatal. 2 steps forward, her knee drove into his midsection with a crack of force. His body lifted off the ground before crashing back, breathless and broken. The last 2 tried to flank her. Smart in theory, foolish in execution. They weren't soldiers, and fear had already stolen coordination from their limbs. She slipped between them, precise strikes turning their advantage into chaos. They stumbled, collided, and fell like dominoes to her will. It was over in less than a minute. 57 seconds, 5 men on the ground groaning defeated, and her barely winded. The silence after violence was always the loudest. Her breath slowed, her pulse steady. Around her, the night was still again, broken only by the distant whine of approaching sirens. Someone had heard. Military police, no doubt. She stood over the leader, who stared up at her in disbelief, wheezing, gasping, his reality shattered by the simple truth. The woman he thought fragile had been unbreakable all along. Said nothing. There was nothing to say. Dignity didn't argue, it didn't boast, it acted. When the police lights spilled across the lot, she straightened, hands relaxed at her sides. Soldiers she trained would never see this footage, she thought, but maybe they didn't need to. They carried her lessons already. The lesson that calm, control, and quiet resilience were stronger than any weapon. And yet, as the officers moved in, as questions began, a different thought gnawed at her chest. It wasn't about these men. It was about something else. A silence she had kept, a burden she hadn't shared. There was something she hadn't told anyone. Not yet. What happens to a soldier when the fight ends but the silence does? She had asked herself that question more times than she could count. The parking lot was empty now. The bikers had been taken away, the flashing lights had vanished, and the depot was once again swallowed by the stillness of Colorado night. Sat in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel, headlights off, just breathing. It wasn't the fight that lingered. It never was. It was the weight of memory pressing into the quiet. The truth was, violence came easy. It always had. What never came easy was the aftermath. That empty space where adrenaline faded and reflection crept in. Tonight was no different. Her knuckles didn't ache, her ribs hadn't taken a hit, her uniform wasn't even wrinkled. And yet, deep in her chest, something throbbed with the kind of exhaustion no rest could fix. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A message. She didn't have to look to know who it was from. Her little brother had a way of sending messages at the strangest times, like some invisible thread between them tugged whenever her spirit began to slip. She picked it up, thumb hovering over the screen. "You good?" 2 words simple, and somehow everything. She typed back slowly, "Yeah, just tired." Then she stared at the blinking cursor, tempted to add more, tempted to tell him about the 5 men who now sat in handcuffs because she refused to let fear touch her. But she stopped. He didn't need to know that, had carried enough of her battles growing up. It wasn't fair to make him carry this one too. She started the Civic. The engine coughed, groaned, then settled into a hum that barely filled the silence. Driving home was muscle memory. Out the gate, down the long stretch of road lined with pine into the sparse housing near Fort Carson. Windows down, the mountain air hit her face, cold but cleansing. She thought about her father. She thought about the boxing gym. She thought about the one thing she had never told anyone, not even. It wasn't about bikers. It wasn't about fights in parking lots. It was about a mission. Years earlier, overseas. A night she had buried so deep, even her fellow soldiers didn't know what really happened. Her reflection in the glass caught her off guard. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled tight, face unreadable. She hated that look. It wasn't strength. It wasn't resilience. It was armor, and armor came with weight. The apartment was dark when she entered. She flicked on the lamp, set her keys in the dish, sat down on the edge of her couch without even taking off her boots. Sleep wouldn't come, she knew that already. So she poured a glass of water, held it in both hands, and let the night replay in fragments. The leader's sneer, the smell of alcohol, the second attacker's body slamming into the truck, all of it clear, sharp, like film on repeat. But as always, another memory began to intrude. A different place, a different night, the desert years earlier. She closed her eyes, tried to push it back, failed. The mission had been classified. That much she could say. A convoy ambushed on a dusty road outside a nameless village. She wasn't supposed to be there, not really. A last-minute reassignment had dropped her into the seat of an armored Humvee alongside men who barely knew her name. They had been loud, joking, filling the vehicle with nervous banter. She had stayed quiet, scanning, always scanning. And then it happened, the blast. The world ripped apart in fire and dust. The Humvee rolled, the ground struck back, bodies thrown like rag dolls. She remembered the ringing in her ears, the taste of metal, the sudden weight of silence when screams cut off mid-breath. She had crawled out, disoriented, weapon in hand. The others. Her throat tightened. She forced her eyes open. That night didn't belong here, not now, but it always came back, especially after fights like tonight, because no matter how many men she put on the ground, she could never undo the fact that she hadn't been able to save them. The army had pinned medals on her after that deployment, commendations, speeches, the whole theater of recognition, but she had never believed she deserved them. The truth was darker, heavier, something she never admitted, not even under questioning. She had killed that night, yes, but she had also hesitated. And hesitation had cost lives. Her phone buzzed again. Persistent. This time a picture. Him at his desk, headphones on, a goofy smile, holding up a thumbs up as if to say, "Stop worrying, I'm okay." She smiled despite herself. He always knew how to drag her out of the darkness, even when he didn't realize how deep it ran. Still, her chest ached with the thought. What if he knew? What if ever saw her not as his sister, not as the soldier who helped pay for his surgeries, but as the woman who had hesitated and lost men in the desert? Could he still smile at her like that? Her hand tightened around the phone until her knuckles whitened. She set it down, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling. The silence pressed in again, thick, suffocating. That was when the knock came. Sharp, unexpected, 3 quick raps at the door. Her body tensed instantly. Midnight knocks didn't happen in her world without reason. She rose, quiet, steps measured, eyes flicking toward the window first. A shadow outside, broad shoulders, military posture, not a neighbor, not a stranger, someone who belonged to her world. She unlocked the door but didn't open it fully. Just enough to see the uniform, the familiar insignia. Colonel, her commander, the same man who had reviewed the security footage from the depot earlier. "Sergeant Blackwood," he said, voice low, deliberate. "We need to talk." Her chest tightened again, not fear, something heavier. because when commanders came knocking at midnight, it was never small. "Sir," she answered, opening the door fully, standing at attention out of instinct. "At ease," he said, though his eyes told her not to be. "I didn't want this through official channels yet. Too many eyes, too much noise. May I?" She stepped aside. He entered, glancing around her apartment like a man already carrying secrets too heavy to put down. "What is this about?" she asked, careful, measured. He turned to her, jaw tight, and for a long moment he didn't answer. Finally, he spoke. "It's about that night in Kandahar," he said. Her stomach dropped. The silence between them stretched like wire pulled to breaking. He knew, or at least he knew enough. Her lips parted, but no words came. He went on, softer now. "You think I don't read between the lines, Sergeant? You think I didn't notice the gaps in the after-action reports, the details that didn't add up?" He paused, eyes narrowing. "I need to know what really happened out there." Her heart pounded, but her voice was steady. "Why now?" "Because," said, "someone else is asking, and they won't stop until they have answers. What do you do when someone speaks the name of a ghost you've tried to bury? Kandahar." The word alone froze her chest. Stood rigid in her own apartment, staring at the man who had commanded battalions, who had seen wars bend soldiers into shadows, and yet somehow still carried enough authority to make her feel like a private again. Colonel didn't flinch under her silence. He had the patience of a man who had waited years for truths no one wanted to tell. His eyes were steady, heavy, like they could pull confessions out of you whether you wanted to give them or not. "I've read every line of that report," he said. "I've heard the citations, the commendations, the polished version that made its way into the archives. But I've also spoken to men who were there, men who didn't come home whole, and I know when something isn't right." His throat tightened. She wanted to move, to pace, to find a way to release the storm building inside her. Instead, she stayed still, fingers curling against her thigh, eyes locked on him. "With respect, sir, those reports were cleared by command. What more is there to say?" He stepped closer, not aggressive but insistent. "There's what's written, and then there's what happened." The air in the room seemed to thicken. For years she had carried the weight of that night in silence. She had told herself it was for the best, that didn't need to know, that her fellow instructors didn't need to know, that burying it was a kind of service too. But now the name was spoken, the memory dragged into the light, and her armor cracked. Her mind pulled her back whether she wanted it or not. Kandahar. The convoy had been routine, at least on paper. A resupply run, nothing more. She had been attached last minute after another NCO fell sick. She wasn't even supposed to be there. She remembered climbing into that Humvee, sitting among men who looked at her with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. She was smaller, quieter, unfamiliar. They joked, called her Philly because of her accent, tried to pull her into their circle of banter. She'd smiled faintly, but her eyes had stayed on the desert horizon. The blast came without warning. No shouted radio calls, no hints. Just sudden fire tearing the ground apart beneath them. The Humvee lifted, flipped, and in that split-second chaos, everything changed. Her ears rang, her head spun. Dust coated her mouth like sandpaper. She remembered crawling free, her body moving before her mind caught up. She had grabbed her rifle, stumbled toward the wreckage. Inside, screams. Outside, gunfire. Insurgents had struck fast, knowing the convoy would be disoriented. She could still see the face of the man beside her, Corporal Rains. 22. Just a kid. Blood soaking his uniform as he looked at her with eyes wide, desperate, pleading. She froze, not for long, but long enough. Her hesitation lasted seconds, maybe less. But in battle, seconds decide life or death. She returned fire, she dragged Rains out, she moved like training told her to. But by the time she secured the perimeter, by the time she called for medevac, by the time the dust cleared, 3 men were dead. Men she should have saved. Men she might have saved if not for that hesitation. And then the strangest part, command called it valor, they called it composure, they gave her a medal, They never saw the hesitation. They never knew. Only she did. And it had eaten her alive ever since. Back in her apartment, she realized she had stopped breathing, watched her closely, not as a commander now, but as something else. A man searching for truth. "You think I don't understand hesitation?" he asked softly. "I've lost men too, Sergeant. I've seen hesitation. I've seen recklessness, and I know the difference." Her jaw clenched. "With respect, sir, you weren't there." "You're right, I wasn't," he said, "but I've read the classified annex. The insurgents weren't just after supplies. They were targeting that convoy for a reason. Something was aboard those trucks, something we never told the public about." He leaned in, his voice low. "And someone out there believes you know more than you've admitted." Her stomach turned. She had never thought of it that way. She'd always carried the guilt personally, like a stone pressed to her chest, but was hinting at something else, something larger, darker. "What do they think I know?" she asked. "That's what I need you to tell me," he said. She shook her head. "Sir, all I remember is blood and dust. I don't know anything else." But even as she spoke the words, doubt gnawed at her, because there was one moment, one detail she had never spoken aloud. When she had pulled reins from the wreckage, his hand had been clutching something. A case, small, black, military issue, but unmarked. She had it from his grip, tossed it aside so she could drag him clear. Later, when the firefight ended, she had gone back for it, but it was gone. No one had ever asked. No one had ever mentioned it, and she had convinced herself it wasn't important, until now. She didn't tell, not yet. She couldn't. The weight of that secret pressed against her ribs, reminding her of the danger in speaking too soon. Instead, she said, "If someone's looking, it means they already think I'm guilty of something. So tell me, sir, what happens when they don't get the answers they want?" Studied her, then exhaled. "Then they make you the answer." The words sank like stones into water. She knew what that meant. Scapegoats were convenient. A decorated soldier with a gap in her story, easy target. The silence stretched until her phone buzzed again on the table. She glanced at it. Once more. A simple line of text this time. "Had a weird dream. You were fighting shadows." Her chest tightened. Fighting shadows he couldn't have known, and yet somehow he always did. Followed her gaze, then back to her face. "You need to decide, Blackwood. If you keep carrying this alone, it'll crush you. If you tell me everything, maybe I can help." Her hands curled into fists. She wanted to trust him. She wanted to lay it all down. But the memory of Raines's lifeless eyes, of that black case vanishing into the dust, kept her mouth shut. Instead, she asked the question that had been clawing at her since he walked through the door. "Why me? Why now?" His answer was colder than she expected. "Because someone else survived that ambush, and they're finally talking." Her blood ran cold. She had believed all these years that she was the only one left who remembered that night, that her silence was the only silence. But now there was another voice, another survivor, someone who might tell a story that collided with hers. And if their stories didn't match? The knock at the door earlier had been a summons, but now it felt like a warning. Who was it? That was the only question echoing in her skull as the silence swallowed Colonel's words. Another survivor. The idea rattled everything she thought she knew. For years she had carried Kandahar like a private curse, convinced the weight belonged only to her. Now someone else was out there, breathing, remembering, talking. But who? Her mouth went dry. She wanted to demand a name, to tear the truth from his lips, but her training stopped her. Patience. Listen first. Always listen first. "Who?" she finally whispered. He shook his head slowly. "Not yet. I don't have confirmation, and if I told you before I did, it would put both of you at risk. What matters is this: their account doesn't match yours, and that gap is going to bring trouble." Her stomach tightened. Trouble. She already knew what kind. Investigations. Hearings. Questions she couldn't answer without exposing the one detail she'd buried, the black case Raines had died holding. "What do they think happened?" she asked, voice steady though her heart hammered. Paced, slow, deliberate, like a man choosing each word as though it were evidence. They think there was cargo on that convoy that never made it to the manifest. They think you saw it, and they think you know who took it when the dust settled. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She opened her mouth, but nothing came. Instead, an image burst unbidden into her mind. Raines's hand clamped like iron around the small black case, his lips parted as if he wanted to speak but couldn't. She had wrenched it free to drag him out. She had dropped it, and when she returned, it was gone. She had convinced herself it was nothing. That memory had almost faded, but now it screamed. She masked her expression. Years of training had made her face a wall when needed. "Sir, with respect, I don't know what they think I saw, but I can tell you this, I didn't take anything." His eyes softened, but only slightly. "I believe you, Blackwood, but belief won't matter when the questions come from above. When men in suits start drawing lines between dots that may or may not exist." Her jaw clenched. "So what do we do?" "We prepare," he said simply. "And when the time comes, you'll have to decide how much truth you're willing to give." He left soon after, his boots heavy against the quiet hall. When the door shut, the silence fell again, thicker now, almost suffocating. She collapsed onto the couch, head in her hands. She had lived with guilt before, but guilt was personal, internal, hers to bear. This was different. This was danger. Her phone buzzed again. Always. She opened it with a half-smile that quickly faded. "Heard engines outside. You okay?" She frowned. "Engines?" She stood, moved to the window. Nothing but the dark street, the faint glow of a pooling against pavement. But her chest tightened anyway. Instinct. That sixth sense honed over years of. She typed back quickly, "I'm fine, go to sleep." But she didn't believe it herself. Sleep never came. Hours bled into dawn. At some point she dozed on the couch, dreams fractured, filled with dust and fire and the sound of men shouting her name across an endless desert. When she woke, sunlight cut across the room, sharp as a blade. She forced herself up, showered, dressed, strapped on the uniform again like armor. Work was easier than thought. Work meant drills, movements, soldiers sweating under her command. Work meant silence inside her head. But that morning, even work felt heavy. She barked orders, demonstrated throws, corrected grips, but her mind kept drifting to words. "Another survivor, doesn't match your account." And then the question that wouldn't leave her. What if they tell the truth and I'm the liar? At lunch she sat alone, tray untouched, coffee growing cold. Conversations buzzed around her, soldiers laughing, arguing, the usual mess hall chorus. She was apart from it all, invisible yet burdened. Until a shadow fell across her table. Sergeant Blackwood. She looked up. A young man stood there, private, nervous. The same kid she'd saved from the bikers days earlier. His hands twisted the brim of his cap as he spoke. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say thank you for the other night. I don't know what would happen if you hadn't stepped in." She forced a small smile. "You're welcome, Private, but remember, courage isn't just about fighting. Sometimes it's about walking away before things escalate." He nodded quickly, eyes shining with respect. "Still, you made me feel like I wasn't alone. That means something." Her chest ached, not from guilt, from recognition. He reminded her of every soldier she'd trained, of the weight she carried for them. She nodded, dismissing him gently, but his words stayed. "You made me feel like I wasn't alone." If only he knew how alone she felt herself. The afternoon passed in a blur. By evening she was exhausted, but not from drills, from thinking, from remembering, from the fear that any moment now someone in a suit would walk in and ask questions she couldn't answer. When she returned to her apartment, the air felt wrong, stale, still, like someone had been there. Her instincts screamed. She scanned the room, nothing obvious out of place. But when she reached the kitchen, her stomach dropped. On the counter sat an envelope. No markings, no stamp, just her name printed in block letters. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. Inside, a single photograph. Her in Kandahar, covered in dust, dragging Raines's body from the wreckage. The image had never been released publicly. She had never even seen it herself. But someone had it. Someone had left it here. On the back, scrawled in red ink, "We know what you took." Her knees weakened. She gripped the counter for support. Her pulse roared in her ears. She hadn't taken anything. She knew she hadn't. But the case, Raines's hand, the way it slipped away, someone believed otherwise. And now they were watching her. The knock at midnight had been one thing, but this was a message, a threat, a reminder that silence wasn't safety anymore. She set the photograph down, closed her eyes, forced herself to breathe. Calm, control. Her father's voice echoed again. The fight is never about size, it's about spirit. But this wasn't a fight she could win with elbows and knees. This was a different battlefield, one of shadows, secrets, and lies. And as the evening light faded, one thought anchored itself in her mind, unshakable. Whoever survived that night in Kandahar wasn't just talking. They were hunting. How long could she carry a secret before it consumed her? That question pulsed through her veins as she stared at the photograph on her kitchen counter. Her own face looked back at her, dusted, bloodied, eyes sharp with battle focus. Yet it didn't feel like her. It felt like a ghost version of herself, frozen in the moment she'd tried for years to bury. "We know what you took." The words on the back of the photo burned hotter than fire. She hadn't taken anything, but someone believed otherwise. Or worse, someone wanted others to believe it. Her first instinct was to call, tell him, show him. But the thought died as quickly as it came. What if this was bigger than even he realized? What if going through official channels only tightened the noose? She slipped the photo back into the envelope, tucked it into a drawer, and stood there in the dim light, hands gripping the counter like it might keep her from collapsing. She thought of his goofy smile, his late-night texts, his fragile health that had shaped her entire life. If they came after her, fine. But if they ever reached for him? Her phone buzzed. Again, she flinched, grabbed it. Another message from Dream again. "You in the desert. Someone watching you from behind. Don't turn around." Her chest constricted. Dreams. Always had them. He laughed them off, called them weird brain tricks. But she had never laughed. Not when they mirrored truths she hadn't told him. Not when they cut too close to nights she wished she could forget. She typed quickly, "Get some rest, little brother. I'll call tomorrow." Then she turned the phone off. She couldn't risk another reminder. Not tonight. Instead, she forced herself to move. Boots laced, jacket on, she stepped back into the Colorado night. She couldn't sit still. Couldn't drown under silence. The base was quiet at this hour. Rows of vehicles gleamed under floodlights, the scent of diesel heavy in the air. She walked without destination, letting muscle memory lead, past the depot, past the training hall, past everything familiar, until her feet stopped at the edge of the range. She picked up a rifle from the armory without asking. The staff sergeant on duty didn't question her. Her reputation bought silence. She loaded, raised, fired. Round after round slammed into targets downrange. Precision, control, discipline. Each shot tearing at the weight inside her chest. But no matter how many bullets flew, the memory didn't fade. The convoy, Raines's hand, the case, the dust swallowing everything. By the time the magazine emptied, her shoulders trembled, not from fatigue, from the truth clawing its way back to the surface. She lowered the rifle, set it on the bench, leaned forward, breathing hard. "What did you see?" a voice asked behind her. She spun, hand on instinct reaching for the sidearm at her hip. But it wasn't an enemy. It was. His eyes flicked from the rifle to her face. "You were never good at hiding your ghosts." She exhaled slowly, forcing her hand away from her weapon. "Sir, you shouldn't sneak up on people like that." "Maybe," he said, "but ghosts don't wait for permission." She turned back to the range. Targets hung shredded in the distance. "Why are you here?" "Because," he said, I thought you might be." She almost laughed, almost. Instead, her throat tightened. "You said another survivor. Who is it?" He didn't answer right away. He stepped closer, voice low. "Staff Sergeant." Her chest tightened. She remembered him now, wiry frame, sharp humor, the one who had cracked jokes in the Humvee just minutes before the blast. She thought he had died. She had believed he was gone. "He made it out," she whispered. Nodded barely, injuries, scars, but alive, and he's been talking. She swallowed hard, the air tasted like metal. "What's he saying?" "That you weren't where you said you were," said quietly. "That you disappeared for minutes in the chaos. That when you came back, something was missing." Her pulse hammered. The words slammed against her like fists. She wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that she had never disappeared, never taken anything. But the memory of that case, the way she dropped it, the way it had vanished, how could she fight shadows when even her own memory betrayed her? "Studied her, tell me he's wrong." She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. The truth tangled in her chest like barbed wire. Finally she said, "I didn't take anything." "But," he pressed. Her eyes burned. "But something was there, something Rains had, and when I went back for it, it was gone." The words spilled like confession. For the first time she spoke it aloud, and the sound of it made her knees feel weak. His face darkened, not with judgment, with calculation. "What was it?" She shook her head. "I don't know, small, black, military issue, but unmarked." He held onto it like it mattered, and then it was gone. Silence stretched, finally exhaled. "Then story makes sense, and that means someone else was there in that chaos, someone who took it." "Then why blame me?" she asked, voice breaking sharper than she intended. "Because you're the one who lived," said. "And in this world, the one who lives always carries the story." Her shoulders slumped. The truth she'd buried was now out in the open, and instead of relief, all she felt was dread. Put a hand on her shoulder, not commanding, human. "We'll figure this out, but you need to be ready, they're coming." "Who, they?" she asked. His eyes met hers. "Whoever left that photo in your apartment." Her blood ran cold. He knew. He'd seen the fear in her face before she said a word. She didn't even ask how he knew. He always knew. "Trust me," said. "This isn't about bikers in a parking lot anymore. This is about secrets buried in the desert, and some people don't want those secrets staying buried." The weight of his words pressed harder than the rifle had. She nodded, barely. That night when she returned home, she didn't sleep. She sat at the window, watching the street, every set of headlights a potential threat. The envelope still burned in her drawer. And in the silence, one thought pulsed louder than the rest. If survived, then maybe he wasn't just talking. Maybe he was hunting too. What do you do when the ground beneath your memories begins to crack? Sat by the window long after midnight, the glow of a painting her in pale yellow light. Her hands were steady on the rifle across her lap, but inside she was unraveling. Was alive, talking, accusing. And somewhere, someone was slipping photographs into her apartment like ghosts leaving warnings. Sleep never came. When dawn finally pushed through the blinds, she rose, strapped her boots, and left without breakfast. The Civic's engine coughed awake, carrying her through the quiet streets toward the base. She needed noise. She needed the rhythm of drills, the shouts of soldiers, the sweat of repetition. Anything to drown the storm inside her chest. The training hall echoed with bodies hitting mats, the slap of gloves, the grunt of exertion. Barked instructions, sharp and precise. Her soldiers obeyed, movements fluid under her watch. But her mind wasn't here. Every strike she demonstrated carried the weight of another memory. Every takedown flashed the face of Rains, of shadows in the desert. At one point, a young sergeant hesitated mid-grapple, nerves freezing him. Snapped. "Don't stop. Don't ever stop when fear hits you, because hesitation will kill you before any blade does." Her voice cracked louder than intended. The room went silent, dozens of eyes fixed on her. She breathed, forced calm, forced a faint smile. Reset again. The drill resumed, but she felt their gazes lingering, whispers trailing after. Her outburst had been too raw, too close to the truth. By the time evening came, exhaustion coated her like sweat. She left the hall and headed for the parking lot, the same one where the bikers had cornered her days earlier. Shadows stretched long across the asphalt. She tightened her grip on her bag. That was when she saw it. On the hood of her Civic, another envelope. Her pulse spiked. She scanned the lot empty, too empty. Slowly, carefully, she approached. The envelope fluttered slightly in the breeze. She snatched it up, slid into the car, locked the doors before opening it. Inside, another photograph. This time not Kandahar, this time her, present day, leaving the training hall the night before. The angle was close, too close. On the back, new words scrawled, "Truth comes out, one way or another." Her breath caught. They weren't just digging into the past, they were watching now. She drove home on instinct, every headlight in her mirror a potential tale, every car that lingered too long a threat. She parked 2 blocks away from her building, walked the rest, scanning, alert. Inside, she went straight to the drawer where the first photo lay. Now two ghosts staring back at her, past and present. She pressed her palms against the counter, whispering to the silence, "Why me?" But she knew the answer, because she had survived, because she had hesitated, because silence made her a perfect target. The knock came again, not sharp this time, softer, almost polite. Her muscles tensed. She moved to the door, sidearm ready, breath shallow. "Who is it?" she called. A pause, then, "It's me." Yes. She opened the door just enough. His face was grave, jaw tight. "You've got company," he said. Her chest tightened. "Who?" He entered without waiting, shutting the door behind him. They're not just watching, they're probing. Questions have already started circling at brigade level. Intelligence officers, civilians in suits. This is moving fast. She shoved the envelope into his hands. They left another one. He studied the photo, his face hardened. "Then you don't have much time." "Until what?" "Until they stop asking questions," he said, "and start making accusations." The words hit like body blows. She dropped into a chair, elbows on knees, head in hands. "I didn't take anything," she whispered. "I believe you," said again. "But belief doesn't matter to people looking for someone to blame. You've got 2 options, get ahead of it or wait for it to bury you." Her head lifted, and he hesitated, just enough for her to see it. "He's giving a deposition tomorrow." Her stomach dropped. "Then it's over." "Not if you talk to him first," said. She blinked. "What?" "You want the truth. Find him. Hear it from his mouth. Face him before the lawyers and investigators twist it into something unrecognizable." Her throat went dry. Face. The man who had survived when she thought he hadn't. The man now painting her as a liar. Could she? Leaned closer. "You always told your soldiers, control the fight, don't let it control you. This is your fight now. Take control." The silence between them stretched. Finally, she nodded. That night she couldn't rest. She sat at her desk, staring at the photograph again and again. She thought about his voice, his jokes, the way he'd laughed in the Humvee minutes before everything burned. And she thought about what he might say now. When dawn came, she drove. Out of the base, across town, toward the small rehabilitation center had whispered about. Was there, recovering still. The building was quiet, sterile, tucked away from busy streets. She walked the hall, boots echoing against tile, until she found the door. His name was on the placard, staff. Her hand hovered over the frame. She could still turn back. Pretend none of this was real. Pretend the past could stay buried. But she knocked. The voice inside was raspy, older but familiar. "Come in." She pushed the door open. And there he was, alive, changed. His frame thinner, scars cutting across his arms, one leg stiff against the chair. But his eyes, those sharp, dark eyes, were the same. He looked up and froze. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them was thick with years unspoken. Finally he broke the silence. "Well, if it is Philly." Her throat tightened. His smile was faint, bitter. "Didn't think I'd ever see you again." She stepped closer, careful. "I thought you were dead." He chuckled, low and humorless. "Yeah, a lot of us thought the same, but here I am." His eyes narrowed. "And here you are." She swallowed. "They say you've been talking." "I have," he said flatly, "because I'm done carrying lies." Her chest burned. "Then tell me what you think happened that night." His gaze sharpened. "What I think? I don't need to think, I remember. You disappeared, Blackwood. You vanished when the fire started, and when you came back something was gone." Her hands trembled at her sides. She forced her voice steady. "I never disappeared. I pulled reins out. I fought. I bled. I didn't take anything." His jaw tightened. "Then who did?" The question hung heavy, unanswered. And for the first time realized wasn't just accusing. He was searching too, searching for the same truth. How do you face someone who carries a different version of your past? Stood in his hospital room, the air heavy between them. He leaned back in the chair, arms crossed, eyes sharp like a blade honed by years of silence. "You say you didn't take it," said, his voice low, clipped. "But you were the only one close enough when Rains went down. Everyone else was pinned. Everyone else was fighting for their lives. You were right there." Her jaw tightened. "I was right there pulling him out, not stealing from his body." His lip curled. "Convenient." The words stung, not because they carried truth, but because they carried doubt, the same doubt she'd wrestled with for years. She had asked herself that night 1,000 times, what if I missed something? What if I could have saved them? What if my memory isn't the full memory? "Why now?" she asked, stepping closer. "Why stay quiet for years and then suddenly speak?" He shifted, eyes narrowing. "Because someone asked. Because someone came to me with questions and with proof." Her breath hitched. "Proof?" He reached for the drawer beside him, pulled out an envelope, tossed it onto the table between them. "That." Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, a photo, not the one left on her kitchen counter, a different one, Kandahar again. The convoy wreckage, and in the background her, clear as day, holding the small black case. Her stomach dropped. It wasn't possible. She had never kept it. She had dropped it. She remembered dropping it. And yet here, frozen in time, a grainy still showed her gripping it tight. Her throat tightened. This isn't real." His gaze hardened. "You think I want it to be real. You think I enjoy believing the one soldier I thought had my back was carrying lies. But I can't unsee that. And neither will they." She set the photo down like it burned. Her pulse roared. Whoever was behind this wasn't just watching her now. They had been rewriting her past. Her voice came out rough, almost broken. "You know me. You rode in that Humvee with me. You saw me fight. Does that picture look like me, or the story they want to tell?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes flicked between her and the photograph, torn. "I don't know anymore." The words cut deeper than accusation, because doubt from an enemy was one thing. Doubt from someone who had once been family, that was a wound that bled differently. Silence stretched. Machines hummed softly in the background. Finally leaned forward. His voice dropped. "If you didn't take it, then someone made damn sure it looked like you did. And if that's true, then we're both in danger." Her chest tightened. For the first time since knock at midnight, she felt something shift. Not relief, not hope, but recognition. Wasn't her enemy, he was another target. "Who gave you this?" she asked, tapping the photo with a trembling finger. He shook his head. "Didn't say. Suits. Civilian. They came weeks ago. Asked about that night, about you. Left this. Told me to think carefully before answering questions." "And you did." His jaw clenched. "I told them what I remembered, that you disappeared, that something was missing. And now," he gestured to his leg, stiff, "I don't know if they want my truth or just my signature on theirs." She pressed her palms against the table, leaning closer. Then stopped letting them on the story. You know me. You know I wouldn't betray my unit. He studied her, eyes narrowing, searching for cracks. After a long beat, he said quietly, "Prove it." The words landed like an order. Prove it. Not to command, not to investigators, to him, to the soldier who had survived the same hell. Her chest rose and fell. She didn't know how to prove something that hadn't happened. How do you prove the absence of guilt? But one thing was clear. Someone out there held the missing piece. Someone who had taken that case. Someone who wanted her to fall. She straightened. Then we find out who it was. Let out a dry laugh. Last I checked, I'm stuck here. Not forever, she said. Her voice steadied, harder now. If they're watching me, then maybe they're watching you too, which means both of us are pawns unless we move first. For the first time, a flicker of the old surfaced. The one who cracked jokes in Humvees, the one who carried light in the dark. He smirked faintly. Still bossy as hell. She allowed herself the faintest smile. Still stubborn as hell. But the weight returned quickly. She tapped the photo again. This isn't just about us. Whatever was in that case, it mattered. Enough for people to kill for. Enough for them to chase ghosts years later. And if we don't find it, they'll make sure the world thinks it was me. His eyes darkened. Then you better move fast, because once they decide you're guilty, nothing will stop them. She nodded once, steeled herself. That night as she drove back, her phone buzzed again. A new message. Dream again. You were running, someone chasing, but you never looked back. Why? Her eyes burned. Because looking back only made the ghosts closer. She wanted to tell him. But instead she typed, because forward is the only way out. She set the phone aside, hands tightening on the wheel. Ahead the road stretched into darkness, and somewhere in that darkness the truth waited. She whispered to herself, steady, firm, like a vow, I'll prove it, I have to. What happens when the truth refuses to stay buried? Drove through the dark streets of Colorado, words still glowing on her phone screen. You were running, someone chasing, but you never looked back. Forward, that was the only way now. But forward meant questions. Forward meant danger. Forward meant uncovering who had stolen the case that night in Kandahar, and who had been rewriting her story ever since. By the time she reached her apartment, her body felt carved from stone. She stepped inside cautiously, scanning. No envelopes this time, no shadows, just silence. But she no longer trusted silence. She sat at the kitchen table, both photographs spread before her. The first, her dragging reins from the wreckage. The second, her leaving the training hall, present day. And now, the one that showed her holding the case. Her fingers brushed it like it was fire. Had she held it, for a second, yes. Long enough to drag reins free. Long enough for someone with a camera to freeze her guilt forever. But not long enough to keep it. That was the truth. Yet photographs were louder than memory. Louder than honesty. Her phone buzzed, not this time. Meet me at the depot, now. Her pulse spiked. She grabbed her jacket, sidearm, keys, and moved. The depot loomed when she arrived, the same lot where the bikers had thought her weak, where she dropped them in seconds. Stood near the edge of the lot, shadowed under a floodlight, hands folded behind his back. She approached, wary. What is this? His eyes flicked to her. They're moving faster than I thought. Deposition wasn't tomorrow, it was tonight. Her chest tightened, and he didn't finish. Her stomach dropped. What do you mean? They pulled him, said grimly. Escorted him out before he could finish the record. Civilians, not army. They left with him in a convoy 10 minutes ago. Her breath caught, gone, taken. Where? His face was carved with tension. I don't know, but if they silenced him, you're next. The words burned hotter than fire. She scanned the lot, instincts screaming. And then she heard it, the low growl of engines. Not one, several, approaching fast. Her hand dropped to her sidearm, turned, eyes narrowing. Headlights cut across the asphalt. Black SUVs, no markings, tires crunching against gravel. They fanned out, blocking the exits. Doors opened. Men stepped out. Suits. No insignia, no names, just shadows wrapped in authority. Blackwood, one called, voice cold, amplified by the silence. "We need you to come with us." Her pulse hammered. She stood firm, sidearm steady but lowered. On whose authority? The man's smile was thin. On the authority of those who want answers. Cooperate and this ends clean. Resist and it doesn't. Behind her shifted. His voice was low. "Your call, Sergeant, but remember, cooperation doesn't mean safety. Not with men like these." She glanced at him. His face was steady, unreadable. Was he with them? Was this all part of something larger? Doubt clawed at her ribs. The lead man stepped closer. "The case, Sergeant, that's all we need. Tell us where it is and you can walk away." Her throat tightened. "I don't have it." He smirked. "Funny, that's not what the photo says." Her stomach knotted. The photo. They had planted it in her apartment. They controlled the story. Her mind raced. Fight, flight, or something else. She remembered her father's words. Control the distance. Control the rhythm. Control yourself. Slowly she holstered her weapon. The men shifted, surprised. "You want the truth," she said, voice steady now. "Fine, but you're looking in the wrong place. You think I kept it. No, someone else took it while I was dragging reins out of the fire. Someone else has been feeding you lies to bury their own tracks." The man's smile faltered just slightly. She stepped closer. "You want to know who? Ask yourself this. Who had the resources to vanish tonight? Who had access to my apartment, to base surveillance, to photographs no one else could have touched? You already know. You're just too afraid to admit it." The silence that followed was heavy, dangerous. The man's jaw tightened. He gestured. Two suits stepped forward. But before they could move, his voice cut through the night. "That's enough." The men froze. All eyes turned to him. His face was hard, his voice steady. "She's right. This isn't about her. It never was. You're chasing ghosts because someone higher than all of us wants it buried. And if you think I'll stand by while you hang one of my soldiers out to dry, you've forgotten who I am." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The air buzzed with tension. Then the lead man exhaled sharply, gesturing his team back. "This isn't over." The SUVs pulled away, engines growling into the night, taillights vanishing into distance. Stood frozen, chest heaving. "Why?" she whispered. Turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Because if they break you, Blackwood, they break every soldier who's ever carried silence, and I won't let them." Her knees almost buckled. She steadied herself against the Civic, breathing hard. The depot fell silent again. The same silence as before, but different now, heavier. She thought of Taken, of dreaming her battles, of Rains, his dead hand clutching the case, of her father, his voice reminding her that control begins inside. She had survived bikers, battlefields, betrayals, but survival wasn't the point anymore. The point was dignity. The point was refusing to bow to lies, even when the world painted them over her skin. She whispered to herself, barely audible but enough. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And in that silence she knew her fight wasn't over, it was only beginning.